Welcome to the Chattanooga Film Festival. My name is Phil Nobile Jr. I'm the editor of Fangoria Magazine, and I'm privileged and pleased to be talking with the star, writer, director, and producer of Bloodshot Heart. How are you guys doing today?
Very well.
Good.
Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure to talk with
you.
you. Tell me, I have so many questions for you, and I'm not sure where to start, but I'm just gonna see where this goes. But the first thing I want to talk to you about, the average question is, tell me how the project got started. But really, I want to know a chicken and egg kind of thing. Did this script start before you had Richard James Allen on board, or did this script change when you had Richard James Allen on board? Because I watched this movie and I'm struggling to imagine what this movie would be like with a different actor in the lead. And it feels like it's coming out of his pores, like he is tethered to this film's DNA in a way that I've not seen a whole lot of. You can fan cast other famous film roles, but Mr. Allen owns this role. And I'm curious, Parrish, how he came into your orbit and how he came into this role.
So I was working on the script on and off while I was at film school. And then towards like my last year of film school, I made a proof of concept that I was going to use to try and pitch to potential producers, or just to try and get it to the next stage. And Richard came in I was casting Hans, and I made him do this really long Italian monologue, and just to test the waters. But so I cast him, and we just made that proof of concept together. And then then once we made the decision to try and actually get this off the ground and make a feature out of it, that's when mine and Richard then were able to kind of help focus the screenplay, and Richard was able to bring his personality, especially once we were filming, to the script and to the story. But I didn't really cast that many people for Hans. It was like, once I had Richard, I was like, he's my man.
And Richard, as an actor, how does this role sort of show up on your desk in terms of, do you recognize the opportunity that it is? Do you recognize the what you're being handed right then? Because this is a pretty much a tour de force. You are running this show in terms of character. You are our touchstone. You're the most unreliable of narrators. You are taking us on this unsafe journey through this man's psyche. Talk to me about what this meant to you to have a role of this sort of size.
I love that, the unreliable narrator through the unsafe journey. Look, I definitely saw this as a wonderful opportunity for me as an actor. Right from the very beginning, I was intrigued by the proof of concept, the chance to act in Italian, and the fact that Parrish obviously had a real nexus of complex, rich ideas that you don't normally see when you're going for auditions for things. So I was particularly excited by that. And then, once I saw the broader scope that the script had, I, really felt it would be a wonderful opportunity for me. And so I, did my best to help Parrish facilitate the film coming to life. I definitely don't think that I'm that character. There's a few funny times when we had both the sound designer and the sound mixer both independently said to me, "I don't know how I feel about having you sitting behind me, Richard." And I was like, "It's just me. I'm just this really nice person." But I did see it as a chance to do some, don't want to sound pretentious, but serious acting, to really look deeply into the nature of another being's consciousness, to try to go to places with a level of detail and empathy for the character, even though they're a really dark character. So I thought it was a wonderful opportunity. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about the empathy thing, because I think, in my opinion, we're at an age where people are generally the worst they've ever been at watching a movie with a perhaps unlikable protagonist. Everyone it seems to be on eggshells about how far you can take a character who's your lead character, out of the sort of the confines of a place where someone feels like they can relate or identify to them. This is not a guy you want to be spending time with necessarily, right? And even Martin, please weigh in about like the idea of producing a film centered around such a challenging protagonist.
Yeah, well, I got involved with Richard at script level, and what attracted me was the likable character, but then with a dark twist, and it reminded me a little bit of like Coen Brothers' Fargo, with a sort of a sad character just losing the plot. And I think Richard, we go there with him on that journey. And at the beginning he seems sort of sweet and innocent, and then we just take it further and further, and Richard pulled that off beautifully.
And is it something very there's a cultural context to this that I don't understand myself, because I'm not steeped in Australian culture, obviously, but I'm curious about sort of what the film is wrestling with in terms of Italians in Australia. Can you give me some context for that, Parrish? Is this because there's a self-loathing to this character, I think, that I found really interesting, and there's also just some outright racism that's directed his way. Is the Italian experience or the Italian immigrant experience in Australia something that informed this story?
I guess that was really definitely my personal connection that I brought, especially to the story, being Italian myself. It's not that, being Italian in Australia is any different to whether, you're of another ethnicity or not. It's just dealing with that idea of, your sense of place and your disconnection to the people around you. And, Hans is someone who doesn't necessarily fit in, and he's in this bubble with his mother. And it's this very controlling, overbearing bubble, and everything else kind of feels alien to him. So, I grew up with a lot of stories with, my grandmother, and grandfather, definitely talking about how they felt, very misplaced, and how they, might have been bullied and everything like that. But I wanted to really kind of heighten this idea of this character just feeling like he does not fit in, and which makes sense with him having to go into his own psychosis and delusion in order to feel comfortable. Yeah.
Got it. And Richard, forgive me for asking, but like, you literally look like one of my uncles in this movie. And I'm curious, are you yourself Italian, or was this?
My background is very complex. That's all I can say.
Fair enough. But talk to me about that experience, that sort of the character has a self-loathing to himself. Like he's grateful that he wasn't named an Italian name at one point. And was that?
I think, I think it's interesting in terms of, there is a tradition of Australian films that deal with the migrant experience of different cultures, including the Italian one. And those films earlier on, like There's a Weird Mob and later on Looking for Alibrandi, were sort of progressively less uncomfortable. But I think that tradition remains. And I think it also remains with newer immigrant groups. And I think there's a sort of a sense in which, if you look at the biggest picture in Australia, we're all immigrants here, except for the Indigenous people. And there's a sort of a level of discomfort, I think, altogether in the country about not quite ever fitting in. And I think that gets acutely expressed, in the more recent groups. And I think that, the dislocation of migration and the kind of dislocation of identity altogether, those are global issues, I think, today. So I think the film, in sort of metaphoric ways, touches on all kinds of discomforts that we experience today.
And also just add that it was like, it was important, like with him being called Hans, which was a bit of a contentious thing at one point. It was like important to me that just because he was Italian doesn't mean he had to have a very Italian name. Like I myself don't have an Italian name. And I think your identity is not just one thing. And by the fact that he's called Hans, you then place your own connotations and storyline to, okay, maybe he potentially had like a German father, or, you know, why did he have that name? And it just adds a bit more color to who he is and his personality and identity.
Yeah, it did. It made it all feel very complete, like a lived-in, complete world that the viewer isn't really getting a total picture of, right? And so I'm curious about that part of the whole thing too, because this is a story that relies somewhat on withholding information from the viewer and giving sort of misleading information to the viewer here and there. How did you, on set or in the development phase, keep that straight in terms of, this is the script and this is what we're filming, but was there a more complete backstory? Was there a Bible in effect for this character and this story that you guys had sort of agreed on in the process?
I definitely had, you know, my whole backstory that I had with the story in the development stages, but I allowed, you know, Richard or, you know, Emily, who played Matilda, to come up with their own story and narrative. Because you kind of, I hope that as a viewer, you kind of get a sense where there is a backstory there and who they are that's maybe not necessarily like on the surface level, you know, and the audience kind of either have to go along with the fact that you're dealing with an unreliable narrator and, you know, you're asking more questions than you are giving answers. But for me, I really love that about like a lot of films that I grew up on. It's like those more ambiguous movies, because it's the more mysterious films. It seems like those films last a lot longer in your memory. So that was always important for me, to kind of withhold certain things that I obviously had to know from the cast, for example.
I think just in an example of that, without going into the details, Dina Panozzo, who played the mother, and I also had discussions, you know, with Parish's permission. We sort of went off and created some really fascinating backstory elements for our family, which I'm not going to reveal, but are pretty cool. But I do think the film is, you know, it doesn't just sit into a single genre, and it doesn't just sit into a single form. And I think that that's one of the things that I find so interesting about it, is that it's playing with some of these genres, but it's quite restless within the frames, and it expresses the complexity of our lives. And those things are not simple, not closed, not open. You know, this is not just simple close and open the doors. It's like there's a whole bunch going on, and the film kind of captures, as you say, a frame of it, but you get a sense that there's a heap of stuff going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. One of the things that frustrates me about a film like this is when publicists and marketing folks need to reduce it to something. Oh, it's like this, but it meets this, and it recalls this director, but there's a touch of this director, and that can kind of screw up critics and viewers when you sit down to watch it, because then you're comparing it to this benchmark, this milestone. You don't want someone to sit down in your movie and be thinking about David Lynch, I'm sure. But what's great is that this film very quickly and very insistently has its own voice. It's very much it's seen those movies, but it's not engaged in mimicry. It's doing its own thing. And I'm curious, has the film in its run, in its festival runs, and in its releases in Australia, has it punched through those comparisons? Are people connecting with it in the way that you want them to?
I think, you know, obviously it's being compared to a giallo, and you know, I'm trying not to be kind of cynical or kind of like reject that, because like it's important to the audience to bring what they want to the movie. But I would say that definitely in the process of writing, it was like I wanted to use genre as a stepping off point, but not be locked into that. And, you know, of course I love like filmmakers like David Lynch, but like, and people probably go, oh, and when I say this, like I wasn't influenced by him at all with the process of making it. I kind of just tried to make something that was authentic to me and Richard and Martin and everyone, and to tell the story. But it is, you know, slowly being shaped by the audience. But it is, you know, when you go into a thing it's going to be a giallo, you are going to be in some way disappointed, because it wasn't really made with that intention. Obviously it has that kind of energy and that feeling, but I also will like say that, you know, if you think about where giallos started, they started off as like, as you probably know, like as these Italian translations of like British crime novels. So in that in itself, it's a translation of another culture, another way of writing, and like this is just like another translation of various genres and filmmakers. If that makes any sense, what I just said. But yeah,
it does.
I might just add to that because the film wasn't funded by any government body, and because we didn't have a pre-sale or a distributor or agent before making the film, it gave us complete, creative freedom. So we had 100% control over the story and how we wanted to make it, how we wanted to cut it. And it's interesting that now in the marketing and the festivals, it's more like the audience reacting, and it's shaping the genre or the slot for the film. But the film itself was complete free will.
Right. Yeah, it's just those festival reactions and those early reviews can almost become like a flu that is getting passed around, and then suddenly everyone's using the same 5 comparison points for your film. And I just sort of, I don't know, I had a weird empathetic moment watching this movie, because I was like, I would hate to sort of have this complete thing that's been created here reduced down to like these comparison points, because you really have created something completely original, and it was exciting to watch it because I didn't know where it was going. And that's a little bit rare on the festival circuit, because so many folks are just sort of vomiting out their influences and kind of doing it by the numbers. And this was not interested in doing that. And I'm curious, Martin, without knowing your exact relationship to this film, I'm curious how you see that on a page and say, yes, let's make this. I'm all in. I'm going to invest the time and energy, and I'm going to find money to make this happen. Because it seems like a bit of a high wire act.
A what act? Sorry.
A high wire act, like you're hoping there's a safety net if you fall off that tightrope. But
yeah, definitely. I mean, it was a bit of a crazy plunge. We started making the film with knowing that we didn't have enough money to finish it, and knowing that we didn't have all the locations lined up. But what we did have was the script and the people and the actors, and we decided quite early that because we wanted that creative freedom, that we weren't going to wait for the perfect combination of distributors and pre-sales and funding and all that. We just decided, let's just do it. So that opened up that. But it was it was a scary production cycle at some points, but we got through it. So it was fun.
Sure, but what did you go into meetings telling people this movie was? Why did this movie need to be made?
Well, we went in saying this is a unique story, unique point of view, and obviously you do pitch a little bit along the lines of this is psychological thriller, and I was referencing David Lynch and Coen Brothers early on, but whether that's right or wrong.
Hey, you got to hustle.
And yeah, exactly. But it's I think with any independent film, it's really a wait and see approach for a lot of agents and distributors, and it's more about let's see how it turns out later on, and then we'll make a decision then.
And my understanding, I read an article that sort of painted a picture that COVID kind of opened a lane for this movie, and it got to be sort of a little more widely seen than maybe a small film would have been. Has that been the experience for you folks?
I think there was.
We've had great support in Sydney, and like Richard was probably saying, we've got a great relationship with the Ritz Cinema. Richard, did you want to add to that?
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say that I think that there was this sort of moment with COVID where I wrote about it a bit in an article, to sort of breakdown in the Hollywood supply chain coming to Australia, which I think made some distributors and some cinema owners a little bit more open-minded to the idea of having a cinema run for an independent Australian film. And so I think we were quite lucky in that sense. And we got great support from the Ritz and Lido group and some various festivals and stuff here and distributors like Fanforce. So we've, you know, we've had some great local support in Australia. And I think the pandemic probably did help that a little bit. Yeah.
That's been the one, as a horror editor and someone who covers these movies, that's been the one exciting thing of the past year, is watching these little movies that would have probably been swallowed up by Netflix or something, just sort of like suddenly have like the box office record of the 20 drive-ins that they played in America in the summer. It's been so weird. This whole year is going to have an asterisk on it in terms of like release patterns and whatnot. It's cool to see smaller films getting their due as a result. It's just been a fun thing to see, I guess, as a side effect of the whole thing. I want to hear about Dina Panazzo, because from what I understand, she's a pretty established television actress in Australia. She very candidly does not have her age on the internet. We're not going to say it here. I'm not asking you to say it, but it did strike me that she does not seem that far apart in age from the gentleman playing her son. So I wanted to hear about that casting and about those choices.
Well, Dina, she's definitely a character in herself. We had to make her definitely look a lot older. That was like one of because she is just naturally quite, or she'll like me saying, quite youthful looking. But Dina was really interesting. She was the only person I ever auditioned for the mother, because she was just instantly had the essence of what I was looking for, which was like this very over the top personality that was kind of very loving already. And just kind of she had this energy of like a lot of Italian mothers. So they just want to kind of like feed you. They just want to like care for you. But it was about having to kind of pull that back, because she is a lot, like there's a lot of control, and I think in her performance and how she does interact in her son, because everything is about this cycle of repetition between the two. And that was where our discussions were really placed, was about just pulling back her natural instinct too, because she is definitely quite well renowned within the theater scene. And obviously you have to like overdo things a lot. And it's very easy for like an Italian mother role to come across as quite stereotyped or too over dramatic, because every character in the film is on the point of kind of maybe being a bit too much. So it was about kind of finding a way to pull that back. Yeah.
And Richard, talk to me about working with her as your mother. You talked about having like sort of creating your own backstories together, but what else was that relationship like?
I just thought of something else before I answer that, which is, you know, I won't go back into the difference in our age, but obviously we worked with, you know, hair and makeup and stuff to accentuate as much as possible. But I think in a way that question that you bring up is okay as well, because I think in terms of this whole thing about layering and questioning and multiple layers, that sort of thread of Oedipalness that runs through the film is only sort of fed a little bit by that slight question. So I think that's actually good as a sort of subtextual layer. This was from my producing point of view. Yeah, Dina and I have known each other for many years. She's wonderful to work with, very, as Paris says, super passionate. You know, I think that we already were friends, but I think, you know, it was interesting. She was very sort of mothering to me and like, you know, no, my son, you know, it's like, and we kind of got into some really fascinating things, and it's a very complicated relationship that we had to portray. So, and we have our own sort of friendship and professional relationship, and, you know, working out different techniques together and stuff. So it was complicated on both sides of the camera, but in a good way.
Very good. Let's see. What else I want to hit on with you folks? Talk to me about, because a lot of the influences, and I'm not going to say them, a lot of the influences that I perceived in the film aren't really mentioned in the press materials or the reviews. So I'm curious to know, Parrish, if you can share what some of the influences on the film were from your point of view.
I would say that really it was like a lot of when I was writing the script, it was like I was listening to, I didn't write a word without listening to like music, like a soundtrack of sorts. So like a lot of my influences, as odd as it might sound, were like a lot of Italian composers, you know, like Stilvio Cipriani or Ennio Morricone, Pino Donaggio, Rizzo Tolani. And the fact that I was listening to those, they like a lot of those composers like Riza Alani did, like a lot of Giallo scores. And I think that's why the film has that feeling of sitting within that genre in itself. And the film, moves between a lot of these different moods and feelings and goes back and forth. And I think that's because of the fact that I was listening to these composers while writing the story. So those composers, more than the filmmakers, I think had actually a bigger influence on me. Obviously there was a lot of like 70s Italian and American cinema, like from like Bertolucci or, Fellini and Scorsese and those sort of filmmakers. But I looked at those filmmakers more, but I tried to make the decision to not just try to play too much homage to them, to kind of forget them as much as possible, because I knew they were in my subconscious while trying to make the movie. And because it's my first film, it's very easy kind of, you make a film that's like based on everything you've watched. And the film is that, and it isn't at the same time, because I tried to let go of those influences as much as possible as well, and try throughout the process, especially into post-production, allow it to become its own thing. Yeah, but the composers were like a really big thing. That's why I wanted the score to be, like that's one of my favorite elements of the movies. Like a Polish composer who she just did a really wonderful job with the music with the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say your influences aren't really like on your sleeve so much as they're maybe, stuck on the wall in the background here and there. Like if you're looking for them, they're there. But again, I really was honestly relieved after reading about the film to watch it and see that it wasn't just shadow puppets of other filmmakers. You really carved out an original space, and I was really, really taken with it. And I'm curious, again, sort of the same question with Richard though, about the influences. What did you pull from to create Hans?
Look, I mean, I don't think for me as an actor, I sort of borrow from one actor or one technique. I drew on a lot of techniques. I mean, one thing I did say to someone the other day that I thought was interesting, well, I thought it was interesting when I said it, was that I watched this interview with Anthony Hopkins, and he said, and someone said, why do you think you're, a good actor? And he said, well, I think that I have a lot of sadness. And I was like, wow, that was actually really good for me, because the idea that you could embody this sort of deep well of sadness. And I think there is a deep well of trauma and sadness in Hans's character, which underlies everything and doesn't excuse the things he does, but allows him a real humanity. And I think that was very helpful for me. But in terms of techniques, I'm very interested in, I've done a fair amount of teaching of, directing for actors and talk about lots of techniques. And I'm very interested in all sorts of acting techniques, but not in a sort of play by numbers way, just sort of as you need them. I would say that, I don't know if you know, but Michael Chekhov's acting technique, he was a Russian who used to work with Stanislavski and did the memory recall, had a nervous breakdown and formed his own technique. And that was the kind of fascinating technique based on imagery and stuff. And I found that very helpful. But, it's kind of like many techniques, and kind of maybe even creating some for myself as I go along. Yeah.
So this is going to play after the film has shown, so we can spoil a little bit. But, the moment in the car when you're opting to blackmail the two brothers, and you break into like a little sing-song thing like that, those moments just felt so authentic and organic. And I'm curious if that was like on the page, or is that something that happens in the moment, or how do you get there?
Well, I think, these things sort of evolve. I mean, he's Italian. I knew that, Parrish and I talked about the kind of music that he liked, that he probably liked Frank Sinatra. And I was like, well, it would just be natural for him to make this a Frank Sinatra song. Do you know what I mean? It would just be like totally natural for him. And he's pretty off the wall. So he would just think that was fine. I mean, the situation, he's already blackmailing someone. So he might as well do this other thing, which is sort of letting another part of him out. And I wanted to show that sense, even when he's doing something really dark, that he's still kind of complex and layered and has sort of layers of culture, and I wouldn't say humor because I don't think he's doing that. Well, he thinks it's funny for himself, but he's a richly layered character, and I think those sorts of, can't stand bad guys who are just like black holes of like can't stand that, or just turn it off. It's like, I'm interested in people who are really complex. I want to understand this person who's about to kill me. I don't want to just go, you're a black hole.
Excellent.
I mean, hopefully that doesn't happen here. You know what I mean, though?
Yeah.
And
talk to me a little bit, Parrish, about sort of the gay characters, I guess, that are presented in the film. There's a lot of trepidation about how to approach LGBTQ characters in film, and I think there's one reading of this film where you can say that Hans is maybe a bit of a homophobe or a bit of a bigot in terms of how he's reacting to Matilda's ex or current, whatever her status is to that. And then on the other hand, the two, I guess, are they brothers?
They're brothers, yeah.
Yeah. I don't even know where to begin with that one. But talk to me about those elements of the story and what your was there any trepidation? Was there any like mindfulness in how you navigated that sort of thing?
I think I tried to approach it just from like his delusional aspect, the way he's perceiving reality, rather than him necessarily going, oh, she's in a relationship with another woman, I don't like the fact that she's within a same-sex relationship at all. It was more that he's getting mixed up whether she's with a man or whether she's with a woman. And he perceives her, the reality he perceives is that she must be with a man, because that means that she must be in this violent, destructive relationship. That I remember at the time writing, wanting to have that sort of narrative that was carrying in his head, because it's based on like, those 70s, like films out of the 70s where you'd have those cliche sort of stories of like these relationships wanting to get out because they're in an abusive relationship. And then with the brothers, it was important that they definitely had to be brothers, because I didn't want it to be that, he's trying to blackmail them because they're gay, necessarily. But yeah, I that representation is there, and it's shown in a very distorted and questionable way, but I hope that it's shown in a questionable way through Hans's lens rather than an exterior point of view.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it was your presentation. It was more like, to me, one read was that Hans was literally rewriting the gay relationship that he saw in front of him to be something toxic and something that he had to save her from, which I found fascinating.
Yeah, and that's definitely a right reading of it, especially because a lot of his ways of thinking is based on his mother's way of thinking, and she, I try to think of what would she think, and she would be definitely against the fact there's a same-sex relationship, because she's in her own little outdated world, and
Sure.
She's influenced her son in that way. So he's definitely, there's aspects of that he would be against. He just wanted Matilda. He wanted to be with her, and he was going to create his own reality of what that meant to be with her, and everything else was in the way for him.
Yeah. And the moment where he goes off his meds, I mean, I don't know if this is the actual intent of the thing, but he has what is a heroic amount of pills in his hands. And to me, that seemed like he was making a choice to either kill himself or then go off the meds, which takes us on that journey. And I found that moment sort of underplayed and really interesting, because he chooses life, I think, but it goes so dark for him. And you've got this, I don't know, I think this is a character that people are going to find, and he's this, not to be guilty of reducing, but he's this weird mashup of Norman Bates and Travis Bickle, and he was just fascinating. I could not take my eyes off this character for the entire film. I think you did something really special.
Yeah. And the thing, with Hans is that, he is, of course we're showing this guy there's a lot of toxic masculinity about who he is and
Sure.
his understanding of the world. and he is a monster in a lot of ways, but he's also suffering from, you know, this mental illness. And it's about, you know, wanting to make sure that, and that's why it was important, I would say, to get Richard, because Richard just naturally is quite lovable. And, you know, he then brings that to the screen, and he just gets, you know, when he has those pills, like, yes, he could be about to kill himself because he has gone through this so many times. And it's like, okay, do I just want to completely let go of reality completely and just be comfortable in the world that I want, no matter what the consequences are? So he definitely sits in this gray area that's not black or white.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it so special, because as I was saying earlier, we've gotten a little binary in our pop culture ingestions, and somebody has to be good or they have to be bad, and the film has to tell you which one they are, and they have to judge, you know, the film needs to judge and hold your hand. And what you've given us is a character with these subtleties and these nuances that we don't get that often anymore. So I want the three of you to recognize how special that is, because I think it's pretty cool, and it was exciting to see it happen.
Oh, thank you so much.
I think I'm out of questions. If there's anything else you want folks to know about this film, I mean, is it coming out on Blu-ray? Is there a US distributor? Tell me what's the plan?
Look, we're still you go on, pardon?
Oh, well, I was just going to say, yeah, the long-term plan is obviously we do want to, that's what we're working on now, is a DVD and Blu-ray. We want to sort of make it like a special collector's edition, I guess. And we will be doing some more streaming and a VOD, but that's not locked in yet.
Yeah, and there are other festivals to come that aren't announced yet. I think that just on your other point about, I really appreciate what you said, that means a lot to me and to all of us, I think. I think that, you know, we sort of feel like it's important to express the complexity of human beings, that we are in a world that is very binary, that people are, you know, hating each other, and they're not taking the chance to sort of try to understand the other point of view. And while we might not agree with what Hans does at all, if we just look at it, we want to kind of express the fact that all people, even the flawed people, are people, and that if we can all approach each other with a little bit more grace and empathy and patience, that it'll be a better world altogether.
Can't argue with that. Gentlemen, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I loved watching the film, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to chat with you here.
Thanks so much, Phil.
Thank you.